Blessings, good evening to you. We have a few questions come in. So tonight is Q&A night, so we'll answer those questions. First one is, what should I do when I feel stressed in a situation? Well, I guess the kind of general answer is always try to be aware and mindful of what's going on, both within yourself and in that situation, wherever you are, whatever's happening. When you bring up present moment awareness, then you can pay attention to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing, what you're saying, and then your relationship to the world around you at that time. And when you're mindful and aware, then panya, wisdom, can begin to operate. So mindfulness brings your attention to what's going on. Wisdom is the understanding of what's going on, and particularly how to reduce and end stress in that moment or in that situation. So, panya, or wisdom, is what you have to develop, and that rides on the back of mindfulness, like a person riding in a car. Mindfulness is the car, wisdom is the person driving, brings them to the place. You need wisdom, don't you, to see what's going on and understand what you need to do. So sometimes it can be something very simple, like pausing when you're feeling stressed, taking a few deep breaths, you're relaxing physically and then mentally changing the experience of your mind, and then the stressful thoughts and emotions start to subside because you've become mindful and you focus on something very calm like the breath. So this time of year, young people are doing exams, and a few people over the years have employed meditation techniques to help them deal with the stress of both, say, revising and preparing for exams that are mainly perhaps going to be important for them because the result of their exam will determine what they do next in their life. So there's a lot riding on their exam. And so people build them up into something very big in their mind. That can bring anxiety, fear, worry, stress, or in the exam itself, because there's that tension of wanting to do well, but then being confronted with questions and tasks that maybe are challenging. That also brings up stress and nervousness in the exam. And quite a few people have use simple mindfulness techniques like reciting Buddha or the chant Iti Piso Bhagawa, or bringing up mindfulness of breathing to bring their mind back to the present moment, and then the next thing is that they can think through what's going on better and recall information better. That's the wisdom faculty, panya, starting to operate because mindfulness is there. Or if it's something else, say a stressful situation at work, dealing with a difficult person, or some task that is challenging, or you have to be in a meeting or talk to your superior or something, and there's stressful feelings arise, well, if you have the time, then maybe just pause for a moment and take stock of what's going on. Again, if you have a technique like reciting Buddha or following the breath for a few moments, literally the feeling of tension and stress in the body can cool down a bit. Or you might pay attention to your thoughts and teach yourself in that moment not to follow the negative thoughts, the worries, or if you can't stop them, to at least remind yourself to be patient with them. You understand yourself in that situation. Oh, I'm feeling stressed because of whatever the situation is. You know what's going on and you just observe. But try not to identify so strongly with the feelings and the thoughts. You just notice them arising and passing away and changing. And the more awareness and the more you pay attention skillfully to what's going on, generally you get through that situation better. If it's a really tense, stressful situation, maybe you also need to use wisdom in the sense, just remind yourself, oh, I should get out of this situation, maybe move away. Or if you're talking to someone and getting stressed, upset, angry, arguing, then wisdom might just say, well, stop talking to them or move away if you can. Talk about that thing later, not now. If it's not quite so serious, maybe wisdom is saying, well, what words should I choose in this situation? And you're thinking through what you have to say in that situation to the person you have to talk to. If it's something like an unexpected fright, like when you're walking through the forest and you encounter a tiger snake, it's stressful, so what do? Well, you stop and you consider, what do I need to do? Maybe backtrack, walk backwards, or walk around the snake. Or if you've already put your foot down right next to the snake, you lift your foot up quickly and move on to get away. If you're driving a car, it's the same, isn't it? Maybe you're suddenly in a stressful situation where somebody else is driving badly near you, or you're coming too close to another car, or some unpredictable situation has arisen and you're feeling stressed. Well, often there's not a lot you can do other than just pay attention. Be patient with the feelings and try to maintain mindfulness so that you can do the right thing, whatever the thing is needed to be safe in that situation. You just do your best. So mindfulness supports wisdom, and wisdom is helping you to see through the stress, let the thoughts go, or be reminding you to be patient with them. Wisdom is really sharp, these thoughts, these feelings are not self. They're just conditions of mind that arise, pass away. Sometimes when mindfulness and insight is really strong, well, you can do that. Other times you just have to be very patient. Another thing to cultivate when you're stressed is metta and karuna. Kindness, compassion for yourself in that situation. And whatever works for you, whether it's a feeling or a particular way of thinking, an attitude, you can bring it up and wish yourself well in, say the right kind of words that convey that intention to yourself. Or focus your mind on a feeling that is more relaxing to you. Or think of something that helps you to feel more at ease. So you think of the Buddha, or you think of your teacher. We get a lot of strength when we practice Buddha-anusati, recollecting the Buddha, or Sangha-anusati, recollecting Sangha. Monks, nuns, teachers, spiritual friends who you know, and you recollect them, and it can cool you down when you're feeling stressed, whether it's angry or afraid or confused, anxious. You recollect that teacher and you feel better, often quite quickly. You're sort of turning your mind to pay attention to something much more skillful than the thoughts of anxiety or stress that may be coming up. Another question, Lumpur, how to help somebody who is getting older and getting sick to be more mindful? I guess this depends on the person, how much of a foundation of the practice they have. If it's somebody who's practiced meditation in the past, listened to the Dhamma in the past, well, sometimes we just try to stimulate that in them again. So you can meditate with them sometimes, or listen to Dhamma with that person to help them become more mindful and reflect on the teachings of the Buddha, which can help them. Talk to them about the teachings of the Buddha, discuss them. If they don't have such a foundation in their life of having previously practiced, well, any kind of technique that helps them to pay attention to the present moment. It depends what illnesses they're experiencing or how old age is presenting for them. Anything that helps them to be more mindful. So simple tasks where they can train in paying attention. And again, you can do that with them or encourage them to do that, things that they like to do that are meaningful. But you also have to remember, if somebody's already old, their body is going downhill, they're weaker mentally, physically, then if they have never practiced mindfulness before, well, maybe you'd have to lower your expectations. It's a very difficult time of life to start learning these things. It's not impossible, but you don't build up too high expectations, because it's quite hard to practice any form of meditation when you're sick or when you're physically weaker. Not impossible, but it's not the best time to begin. Much better to begin earlier in life, isn't it? But still, being mindful yourself with an older person, often it's a parent, grandparent, elderly family member or friend. If you're practicing mindfulness, that can have a good effect on the people you're with. So if someone else is an older person, you practice mindfulness, this will have a good effect on them, even if they're not particularly practicing themselves. Because often, due to past habits and the build-up of perceptions and our attachments to that old person, often we speak in certain ways that are maybe not very mindful or act out of habit because we know that person very well. So if you can introduce more mindfulness in your own behavior, your own speech, your own actions, that may have a good effect on them. So number one, we'll practice kindness and compassion with them, help to care for them, take an interest in them, see what ways you can do to stimulate the arising of skillful memory, skillful thinking in that person, in the way you relate to them. So your own practice can stimulate something good in them. At the very least, there's the practical help of just being mindful, caring around them, being sensitive to them. But better than that, maybe your practice of mindfulness can make them a little bit more aware, and you can. What the Buddha encourages us to do is get them to talk about past good actions, skillful actions they've done in the past, remember them, bring them up, talk about them. That can have a good effect on their mind. Talk about things that make them feel happy and relaxed. As we get older, we don't have to go to work anymore once we retire. That's something to be joyful about. If you have enough in your life, material wealth, obviously if you're struggling materially, that's different. But if somebody has enough food, a place to stay, they've worked earlier in their life, they've earned their money, they're there, they've got the things they need, and then they have friends, they have family, get them to appreciate or encourage them to appreciate what they've got. And this is a very easy way to be happy. As you get older, it's often you don't need so much to make you happy in life. When you're like young, you have a lot of energy, which tends to be kind of supporting a lot of craving and attachment. So the younger you are, you want to earn money so you can do this and do that and go here and go there, and you kind of associate your happiness with all these material things and traveling and partying and social events and this and that and buying things. When you're older, you don't need to do so much to be happy. You can just appreciate the fact that you've achieved old age. Have mudita for yourself, so you can talk to them in a way of encouraging mudita, that they're still alive after all these years. And then you have mudita for friends, so as you get older, maybe just spending time with friends, chatting is all you need to be happy. Or spending time with family, having family around is all you need to be happy. You don't need to be traveling so much and buying things and shopping and having all these more material experiences to be happy. You can draw attention to that in the older person. You can do it through conversation, through encouraging them to appreciate these simple happinesses, or maybe they already do. Maybe they're the ones who teach us if we're younger. We can learn a lot from older people, because often they're more laid back and relaxed and get less stressed about life because they've already been through it and they've learned lots of lessons. So often older people are teaching us as much as we're helping them. But if they're getting stressed because of the changes in their body, then you encourage them to just adjust their perception and their attitudes. Because when you get older, you've got less mobility, your faculties are fading, so you don't see so well, don't hear so well, can't do so many things. So encourage them to adjust their view in line with the degeneration of the body. Because one of the sufferings of old age is often your mind wants to do things, but your body can't keep up. It's not so fast, not so agile. And when you get older, you fall over more often. Things don't go so well. So you have to adjust that, adjust your view of life and what your expectations and where you're looking for happiness and what you can do, what you can manage when you're older. So you can help that person to be more mindful of just the fact that the body is not so mobile, their eyesight is going, or the hearing is going, or the memory is going. Someone was talking today how their mother is very old now and is becoming forgetful, but the mother is mindful enough to know she's forgetting. So then it's not such a stressful thing. If you know you're forgetful, then you don't get shocked by it or annoyed by it. You're ready for it because you're mindful that your memory is impermanent. Particularly people who've meditated and heard the Dhamma, they understand this. Listening to Dhamma regularly helps to be more mindful. So playing Dhamma talks or reading Dhamma books to an elderly person helps them to establish good understanding, right view, or reminds them of wisdom teachings that they've heard earlier in their life, brings them up, and that can have a very illuminating effect on the mind, brightens the mind, brings a lot of happiness, and the understanding can help them to let go of a lot of stress. Another thing to remember is that we're aging from day one, aren't we? A baby is born, it's already aging day by day, growing. It's just when we're young, we're so full of beans and The body's growing, it's full of expectation, ambition, desire. And then as you reach middle age, it all turns and you start to focus more on the end of your life. But actually physically we're aging from day one. So even little babies display some of the traits of aging, the physical aging of the body. So the quicker you can get into your practice earlier in life, the more you can adjust your view in line with the truth. So even if you're only 20 or 30, you can notice that you're aging and get used to being mindful of aging. The changes in your body, aches, pains, illness, limitations that come as you get older. So the worse it becomes, or the more intense it becomes with greater age, it doesn't bother you so much because you've already been following it and being mindful of aging from a young age. So you know, oh, that's just the way it is, it's just ordinary. In Thailand they have this wonderful word Thamada, which is related to the word Dhamma or Dhamma. Thamada means ordinary or natural. So somebody whose mind is in line with aging or with the truth, they just see it as ordinary. Getting old is ordinary. Eyesight going is ordinary. Hearing going is ordinary, it's normal. Back aches and leg aches and various aches and pains and arthritis and disease and this going wrong and that going wrong and mobility problems, all of this is just normal when your mind is in line with the Dhamma, when you're reflecting on Dhamma. So they use this word all the time. They say, oh, it's Thamada, it's just normal, it's just ordinary. And the mind doesn't get stressed then. And the mind is in line with the truth. As long as it can see it's just normal or ordinary, then your mind can be at peace, at ease. So I have a word like that you can use over and over again, both to maintain mindfulness and also give you the right attitude, right understanding. So if you ever lived in Thailand, like monks who have lived in Thailand and live in the West, they often use this word. They say, oh, it's Thamada, even though they speak English every day, but for those who understand the word, they say, oh, it's Thamada. A very useful word. You could use, it's normal, or this is the way it is, or it's natural, it's the way things are. If you're mindful of the way things are, you don't create stress out of aging. Another question. You said last week we have to clear out our attachments, but they seem to just come back again when you next contact the sense object. How to stop this process? Cultivate Magga, the path, as we just chanted. We just chanted the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Eightfold Path, beginning with right view, right understanding, right effort, right mindfulness to right samadhi. This is what gives you all the right qualities to see a craving and attachment, abandon craving and attachment, and when you truly abandon it, it doesn't come back. What abandons craving and attachment is clear knowledge and vision of the way things are. So, wisdom and insight. Samadhi alone certainly gives you a good rest from craving and attachment. So it's an essential part of the path. But we all know you can have a really good meditation and go really deep and let go of your feelings of your body and all the thoughts, and your mind becomes very bright and one-pointed and still. And then you emerge out of that and you can still get angry and worried and fed up and you still have all kinds of desires and lust and everything. Samadhi alone is not enough. You need wisdom, panya. Panya is what cuts off attachment. cuts off the fuel of attachment. Clinging and attachment is the fuel that leads to becoming. And that's going on all the time through our life. So as soon as you come out of that nice deep state of samadhi, you have to carefully maintain mindfulness and cultivate insight into whatever your mind is picking up and starting again. You start to want things and like things and attach to things. Why do we give up attachment? Because we see that it leads to suffering. That's wisdom. If you know something leads to suffering, then you let it go. You drop it, you let it be. Because you know it leads to suffering. And nobody wants suffering. So if you find your attachments are re-emerging, having heard the Dhamma, meditated, practiced the Dhamma, your attachments disappear and then they all re-emerge again, they come back. It's a sign that you still need to contemplate a bit more, develop more wisdom, more mindfulness, pay more close attention, reflect more deeply until your mind really doesn't want suffering and it really doesn't want to pick up those objects that lead to suffering. Mental states rooted in greed, anger and delusion, and the identification with objects. The number one object is this body. And the senses, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, that's where you need to keep paying attention, contemplating. And your mind, when true knowledge and vision arises, it gets tired of clinging. Because you suffer from clinging, so you get tired of suffering, you don't want to suffer, so you stop little by little, or quite quickly, depending on how well developed the factors of the path are. So in the time of the Buddha, a lot of people had very well developed spiritual faculties and sila, samadhi, panya, so they hear the Dhamma and they quickly drop their clinging and attachment because they know it leads to suffering. Having heard the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and they just drop attachment, just like fire. Why carry something around that's hot and burning you? If you just drop it, then you're free from that suffering. Why hold on to anger when it only brings you suffering? Let it go, let it be. Cultivate clarity, and this leads to detachment, equanimity, relinquishment, disenchantment, equanimity. If you're truly disenchanted and you don't want to suffer again, you'll let things go. But we still have a lingering doubt, don't we? We're not beyond doubt. So we pick things up again, thinking, well, I'll just get a little bit more happiness from this before I finish with it. So instead of completely letting go, we start picking up again. Just want a little bit more fun, pleasure. Your mind does that, it goes into this picking up, grasping, craving, attaching again, identifying with sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, not seeing them as impermanent, suffering and not self. What did the Buddha teach most of all? He taught most of all to see that all physical, mental things are impermanent, suffering, not self, not to be clung to as self. Over and over again, from many different angles, he keeps teaching this. So we have to keep practicing it until the mind gets the point. Then you know. Once you get the point, your mind knows, then it doesn't want to pick up again. Doesn't want to crave, doesn't want to follow all those trains of thought that lead into more craving, clinging, becoming, suffering. You can't change the world. The world is an imperfect place, and things will happen that are unpleasant, painful, things that are tempting. We're tempted by pleasant sights and sounds and tastes and smells and even just states of mind. We're tempted by the pleasant and we get annoyed and frustrated by the unpleasant. That's the way the world is. But we have to train our mind to see and know the way the world is, so it's not caught out by all this pleasant and unpleasant objects that come to our senses. So when we develop clear knowledge and vision, the mind becomes equanimous. So it doesn't grasp at pleasure, doesn't grasp at pain, just knows things. So meditate a lot, contemplate a lot, and you'll cling less. In short, you haven't done it enough. None of us have done it enough, so it keeps re-emerging, so keep working at it. Another question. Ajahn, I have a question. With the cessation of name and form, there is the disappearance, atangama, of citta. Can Ajahn please explain this one? Thank you. I guess citta means consciousness, doesn't it? So with the cessation of name and form, there is the disappearance of consciousness, citta. Well, these different factors of the teaching on dependent origination, dependent arising, they all depend on each other, even though on paper they're all in one line, a series of links. So we have avijja, ignorance is a condition for mental formations. Mental formations arise dependent on avijja, ignorance. And in dependence on mental formations, consciousness arises. Consciousness is there, so nama rupa, name and form arises dependent on consciousness. But it works the other way around as well. Nama rupa can be the cause for consciousness. Consciousness can be the cause for nama rupa. Nama rupa means, we say, name and form, or mentality, physicality. Mentality means the mental objects and activities of the mind. So it's perceptions, thought formations, sense consciousness, feeling. The stuff that fills up the mind. If you look at the mind as like an empty vessel, it's the stuff that fills it up. Form is the physical elements, earth, air, fire and water. So in this form of a human, makes up the body, but everything out there as well, other people's bodies. So name and form arise based on the presence of consciousness. So where does it all begin? Well, an embryo forms when there is consciousness ready to be born, sampawesi, or Gandhava we call it. Consciousness wants to be born, consciousness conditioned by past craving and attachment. And then there's an egg, fertile, healthy egg, and then there's the semen from the male sperm come together and consciousness. So you get those three things. You get an embryo, and then the embryo forms in the womb and it grows, and then you get birth, and then you get life. So consciousness is needed for the physical elements and the mental activity to develop. But because of the sense of self, which comes from avijja, ignorance, we create a sense of self, and we don't understand the Four Noble Truths that well, so we keep holding on to, grasping on to this sense of self. That feeds karmic formations, good and bad. We keep making karma, and that produces more consciousness. Consciousness, moments of consciousness, fed by this sense of self. And these keep the whole mind-body, name and form process going, and name and form reinforces the sense of self, so it feeds back into consciousness. So like two things leaning on each other. So if you pull one away, then it starts to collapse. So if we practice mindfulness and get really deep, consciousness is so subtle, isn't it? Who can see moment-to-moment consciousness? We have to practice a lot of mindfulness and develop refined states of samadhi to really see this consciousness, mental states from moment to moment. But it can be done, because the Buddha proved it can be done, and other teachers have proven it can be done. And the key is developing this wisdom into insight, clear knowledge of or realization of the Four Noble Truths, because that removes wrong view, ignorance, delusion from the mind. So then consciousness starts to be less attached to with the sense of self. Mentality, physicality, the body and the mental khandhas, start to see them as not self when there's wisdom present. So wisdom is conscious, as we develop it, is constantly undermining this sense of self to the point where when the path factors, sila, samadhi, panya, develop well, then the mind separates from the sense of self. The sense of self no longer forms in the body and consciousness. So it's like the whole thing collapses and it goes to cessation, because there's no sense of self feeding it or holding it along, stringing it along anymore. Becoming ends. Like we chanted with the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, no more becoming for me. That's the Buddha. We haven't reached that point yet in our practice, but as you meditate, you're already starting to investigate that process. And you're seeing how, as long as there's ignorance, this mind identifies straight away with body and feelings and perceptions and thoughts. But as mindfulness becomes more continuous and we experience states of samadhi, what do you experience when you experience a state of samadhi? Stillness is like this separation between the knower and the known. And what's known? Well, it's the body, which is the coarsest thing, but then feelings, mental states, consciousness gradually becomes more known as impermanent, suffering and not self. As that clear knowledge and insight arises, and the Four Noble Truths are revealed to the mind. So the Buddha compared them to an ancient city that all previous Buddhas have reached, chopped through the jungle of delusion and ignorance to get to this old city of clear knowledge and vision of the way things are, which cuts through this process of dependent origination. So even consciousness is abandoned and all the five khandhas are seen as not self, and so there's this separation, letting go. And then you say, well, what lets go? Who lets go? Well, nothing lets go. It's just a natural process of clear knowledge and vision, letting go of the ignorance of self or the attachment to self. When that's done completely, then there's no more birth. If it's done a little bit, then birth is reduced. Maybe you practice a lot of meditation and cultivate this path, maybe you reduce your number of future rebirths from 1 million down to 100,000, down to 1,000, down to 100, down to 10. But in the text we go around down to 7. One who practices mindfulness continuously, perfectly, develops insight into the Four Noble Truths, sees physical, mental phenomena, nama, rupa as impermanent, suffering, not self, lets go. 7 lives at most, or 7 years, or 7 months, or 7 days at most. They will live and then let go of this attachment. So we have to keep cultivating the path to see through the conditioning process, the way consciousness and nama rupa support each other, support the delusion of self. We have to investigate that. So it's good to read it through, read the suttas on this and contemplate it, but practically speaking, we've got to cultivate strong, continuous mindfulness and then insight into the impermanent nature of body and mind. And just keep doing it until that insight sticks and there's no more room for doubt, fuzziness. Last question. Ajahn, why do I find it so hard to keep up a regular meditation practice? You have to ask yourself, what is it that you're attaching to that's not meditation? Your favorite music, TV program, website, hobby, person, activity that has nothing to do with meditation. When we're younger, it tends to be work, doesn't it? You've got to give all your time to your job to earn the money to pay the bills. And maybe then you get a family and you've got kids and you give all your time to your kids. And we always put it off and say, I'll do it later. And then later never comes. Or when it does come, you're too old and it's too difficult. So you have to sit down and think it through for yourself. What do you want from life? Do you just want to earn the money to pay the bills and then get old? But when you get old, your mind is full of suffering and all these things you've purchased in your life and all these kids you've had and all these people you know. When you die, you don't take any of them with you. So one very powerful contemplation to get you meditating is death. This is why the Buddha keeps slipping into his teachings. Death is 100% for sure. It's inevitable that I'll die. When I die, what do I take with me? I only take the Dhamma, the knowledge and vision, the good qualities that I've cultivated in my life. Everything else I don't take with me. People, wealth, I can't take with me. I leave all that behind. So try not to get so caught up in it during your life and keep bringing your mind back to the Dhamma. So make that commitment to meditate. 10 minutes a day is all you need. You must be able to find 10 minutes a day. That's a good starting point. Just 10 minutes a day, but do it every day and build up from there. And when you're getting lazy, distracted, just remind yourself, I'm going to die and all this other stuff I'll leave behind. You leave your job, you don't do your job forever. You have to separate from all the people you love and like, all the places, the things that you have. You'll separate from them all. So remind yourself of that. That's what death means. It means separation from all that you love and like. When you die, as we were just saying in the last question, what do you have left is consciousness. And if consciousness is full of attachment and becoming, there's lots of suffering there. So at the end of our life we have confusion, sometimes we have a lot of regret, anger, accumulated anger, we have becoming, we have all our fears and all the things we still want conditioning our mind. So our mind is not very peaceful. Start practicing, get ready for that. Practice dying every day, do some meditation. Let the mental defilements die, and what's left is the good stuff, Dhamma, Sila, Brahmaviharas, mindfulness, wisdom, all these good things that you hear about all the time in the talks. If you let the kilesas die, then the good stuff is left. So often people have to have a crisis before they start meditating regularly. They have to get the cancer diagnosis, have to have the car crash, have to go through the nasty divorce, have to have lose their job or lose their money. All these kind of things we call crisis. Then they see the suffering, then they start meditating. But don't wait for the crisis, start now, right now, today. Devote 10 minutes to some meditation every day. Prepare for the crisis, or hopefully it never comes, because if you practice meditation every day, maybe that will be enough to stop you falling into a crisis. It will change your life, revolutionize your life. Something as simple as 10 minutes of meditation a day will change your whole life for the better. I guarantee it. If you do it sincerely and you really use it as a way to train in mindfulness, as you become mindful, it changes your attitude, your outlook to the world, and your attention turns inwards a bit more, so then you see that the real happiness of the world and peace comes inside, and then the things of the world on the outside are seen in perspective. They're not so important. Doesn't mean to say they're totally irrelevant, but they're less important than you think. And the real place of happiness comes from cultivating mindfulness and insight on the inside. And your relations with other people, your relationship with the world, your ability to do things in the world will actually improve the more in touch and aware you are with yourself on the inside. So think it through, remind yourself why it's good to meditate, what are the benefits, remind yourself of all that, so listen to the Dhamma. If you're straying from the path of practice, come back by listening to the Dhamma. Until that Dhamma sticks in your mind, then it will become more natural to practice. Listen to lots of Dhamma, reflect on the Dhamma, and then keep determining to practice. As Ajahn Chah used to say, just do it. Do it 100%, not 50%. Do it 100%. Just do it. Nothing else really matters. What else is there in the world? You've been there, you've done that already, I'm sure. Nowadays, even, as a child, you have access to all the information of the world, on all the sight, sound, taste, smell, touch of the world. There's so much you absorb really quickly, and it doesn't bring you happiness, does it? It tends to confuse you and stimulate more craving, more desire, more disappointment. So quickly clear up your doubts about the world and get into the practice. That's where real happiness comes from. So that was the last question tonight, and we'll leave it there. And we'll wish you all progress in your meditation, progress in your Dhamma. May you see the impermanence of body and mind, let go of the sense of self, the attachment, let go of becoming, end birth or rebirth for you. May that be a reality. And so may you realize the Four Noble Truths, experience the peace of the Dhamma.